Gareth A. Davies. It's been a while.
Do you know?
A couple of weeks. It's been a couple of weeks.
Do you know what? Time has passed so quickly, and yet there's been a kind of joining the dots process for 2 weeks where everyone's still talking about Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev and Ben Whittaker and Chris Eubank and Conor Benn and Fabio Wardley and Fraser Clark. And I feel like I know you almost didn't. Well, you didn't leave Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Spiritually, I didn't either, apart from a trek around London 3 or 4 times, different places last week, ahead of the Azim O'Hara Davis card. To be honest, I've been doing the same old, same old. That's what I've been doing, and a bit of swimming every morning. I think I've done 20 sessions since I got back from Riyadh. I've been really caning it. It's you who've been in the heart of the action.
Yeah. No, I've been in Riyadh, as you know, for Bivol Beterbiev, but then I stayed out for an extra, 8-9 days to cover the tennis over there. It was called the Six Kings Slam. So 6 of the best tennis players in the world: Nadal, Djokovic, Sinner, Alcaraz, etc.
Come on, name them all. Name them all. Name the other 2.
Medvedev, Holger Rune. So those were the 6. And it started as something big anyway, but then it became something even more big because Nadal, sort of a day before the tournament, announced he was going to retire. So it went from, a tennis tournament that was going to be seen by controlled by 6 broadcasters to like 69 broadcasters all around the world saying, okay, one second, if this is Nadal's last tournament, we need to kind of get sort of hold of this as well. So it became a lot bigger. And then 2 days into the tournament, I got a call saying, Ade, would you like to interview Ronaldo?
The Ronaldo.
What? The Ronaldo. Cristiano Ronaldo, the GOAT, many say, of football. I'm going to jump a few chapters here. The interview didn't happen because Ronaldo had finished training. He was tired, and I was asked to come back on Wednesday. This goes out on Wednesday. I was asked to come back today, and we'll see how that pans out. But it's been a busy 2 weeks, and it's good to be back.
Can I just ask you a question? Because I've always watched Rafa Nadal with that powerful left hand of his, and I've always, when you were with him, when you saw him up close, I've always fancied him to be a very, very, he would have been a great boxer for some reason.
Yes.
Do you have that feeling about him?
Yeah, and the thing about him being a boxer is interesting because there'd be a comparison with Miguel Cotto, where Cotto was right-handed, but was fought as a southpaw because he trained that way. And Nadal's
is he right-handed?
Nadal's
unbelievable,
right-handed.
And he's so left-handed when he plays
left
tennis.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you're right; he would be super powerful because his left arm's almost a bit Popeye-ish, isn't it? Because it's so big and strong. But he is actually right-handed.
Whenever I've looked at him, when I see his motion, when I see him serve, when I see his physicality, I've always thought, you could box if they put you in a ring. And Andy Murray once, by the way, I went to a session with Andy Murray and Amir Khan. And Andy Murray was on the pads with Amir Khan, in the gym with Amir Khan. Wow, he had a dig on him, did Murray?
Yeah, they're gonna have like powerful hands, tennis players. Yeah. I mean, the amount of repetition they do as well. I mean, they're going to be strong, and there's no fat on them whatsoever. These are lean killing machines, these tennis players. Yeah, so it was great to be out. As you know, it's always great to be out in Riyadh.
And to be close and at the heart of another sport at the very elite level of it. Are we going to lose you to courtside tennis or not?
You know what? I throw my hat in the ring, to coin a boxing phrase, because it was nice. You know what it was, Gareth? Obviously, look, you've covered boxing for nearly as long as I've been alive. And sometimes it kind of can bog you down, all the politics and all the narratives. And it was quite refreshing just to be at a tennis tournament.
I get it.
And nothing.
I've covered many other sports as well.
Drama,
when you step outside boxing sometimes, it's nice to be in them, but it's nice to come back.
It's nice to come back, and it's been a good weekend to come back as well. Let's talk about you were at the Copper Box. Were you there?
No, I was in the studio. John Rawling and Spencer Oliver were actually in the Copper Box, but I was at the events all week around them all, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay. Myself and Adam Cattrall in the studio because they were pulling the plug early before we could finish the show, so we had to do it from HQ.
Okay. Adam Azim beating O'Hara Davis, stopping him in the 8th. O'Hara Davis deciding no more. Eventually, O'Hara Davis would go on to say, look, no more in terms of his boxing career. I want to focus on Adam Azim, though, just because we are looking for stars. I think we're almost desperate for stars over here. Maybe we're giving people that title of being a star too quick, but we're desperate for stars. Do you see Adam Azim as being that future star that we are desperately searching
Well,
for?
we've been told he's a star for a couple of years now, and he's been very interesting to be around since the age of 19. I did notice last week, being up close and personal with him, that he is definitely growing as a man, as a person. There was a time when it was hard to interview him. He didn't know what to say, but he's becoming more mature. I think he's got the flashing fists and style of an Amir Khan, obviously inspired by people like Amir Khan. I think, is he going to be a superstar? That the people will decide. I mean, he's very liked and he's got all the skills. But alongside those things, he's got to beat the likes of Dalton Smith, first of all, in this country. Yeah. And then he's in that division, Devin Haney, Tio Lopez, potentially Gervonta Davis, Shaka Stevenson, Ryan Garcia, not to mention Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor, all in this weight division. Regis Prograis, obviously, we're going to talk about as well. I mean, it's a stacked division. It's Liam Powerrow. It's an amazing division, and there's lots of opportunities. But I think, just to talk about what we saw on Saturday night, we saw a very composed fighter who picked his punches, controlled range very well, controlled the distance very well, and did very little wrong against a guy who could have given him problems in O'Hara Davis. So, yes, he's developing 9 out of 10, and he's on the way upwards.
Yeah, it's good matchmaking as well, isn't it? Because everyone knows who O'Hara Davis is. The casuals, the hardcores. O'Hara Davis is
the Derek Chisora of the 10-stone division, I call him.
That's a very good shout. That is a very, very good shout because he's got that energy. It's just a smaller version of him. And I still think there's something left with O'Hara.
Agreed.
But if he wants to call time on that career, then so be it. But I still think he had something. Yeah, I think there's something to offer. I guess he just doesn't want to be a gatekeeper, but there are still fights he can sort of have away from the UK and fight some of these sort of faded Americans or faded Europeans and make some money.
I agree with you completely. And that's what I was saying last week when I was with him. I said to him, we interviewed him, and I said, "You're like Shakespeare's fool." And I said, "Please understand what I'm saying. In all the Shakespeare's plays, Shakespeare's fool is the one that speaks the truth and no one likes it." And I've got a feeling with O'Hara that, and I said to him, you're on the verge of being a cult figure with British boxing fans, because they went through that passage when no one liked him and he became famous and he said the wrong things, very similarly to Derek. And now everybody loves Derek. And when O'Hara speaks, you want to listen. He's very real. So I agree with you. If they could find him the right 3 or 4 fights, I just think he could become a bigger star than he is.
Yes, it's interesting that there's been a good U-turn, and it's good to see it watch as well. He was hated and vilified. I remember Eddie saying something about him. I can't remember the exact terms or words Eddie used, and I felt like he was kind of pushed back O'Hara, thrown under the bus. I think O'Hara coined it as. And since then, when he talks, the rooms go silent. Everyone wants to hear what he has to say because unfortunately boxers don't really talk as much. But I like him. I think he's still like. Well, how old is O'Hara?
33.
Guess and say 33. Okay, maybe 3 or 4 more fights. If I'm him, I try and fill my bank balance as much as possible. Make sure they pick you the right fights. But I think people will tune in just to hear what O'Hara's got to say. That's why.
Yeah, well, he pulled him from the card after the tweet controversy, didn't he? Eddie Hearn pulled him from the card, and he said, and Eddie and O'Hara said, "You've thrown me under the bus, Eddie. You're right about that."
Yeah,
we won't go into the.
No, won't go into the tweet, but I almost feel like with O'Hara, he's someone that everyone wanted to talk to sell fights, but then there was almost this, okay, you can't say that though. It's like, well, you told the kid to talk, and now he's talking. You don't want him to talk. Let's move on to Anthony Yarde versus Wilkins. Anthony Yarde, obviously, this one fight deal with boxer. We're not going to get into the Frank Warren scenario and situation surrounding it. It looked like it was going to be an early night for Yarde, put Wilkins down in the very first round, and then pushed all the way in this 10-rounder. I think the scores were 98-92, which I thought might be a bit harsh on Wilkins. But what did you make of Anthony Yarde's return to the ring? Hasn't fought since, what, February?
We can't call it with glowing colours, because even though the first 2 seconds of the fight, his first right hand, and we floored Ralph Wilkins, who came in with a 17-1 record. 90% of his fights have been in Riga, Latvia. He hadn't really fought anyone that we were really aware of in terms of standings in the 175-pound division. I think what happened was, this is how my reading of it. Anthony Yarde was shocked that he put him down with his first punch and thought, I want to get a bit of roundage in here. I want to get some rounds in this fight. Sat back a little bit and thought, I'm going to pick this guy apart whenever I feel like it. And unfortunately, allowed Wilkins into the fight. I scored it 96-94. And I think Yarde did the rounds and then went after him and couldn't get him out of there. Wilkins found his mettle. And it went 10 rounds, and Anthony didn't look fantastic. And obviously Joshua Buatsi was ringside. I wanted him to step into the ring and put his forehead on him, but that wasn't going to happen. Joshua Buatsi was on our broadcast as well, by the way, with the boys down there ringside. So it was kind of disappointing in lots of ways. I mean, but I think Anthony Yarde explained it to Wilkins afterwards. There's a little clip of him saying, "You had me there because I thought I'd had you beaten, and then you recovered." I really just think he relaxed and didn't go after him. If you threw Anthony Yarde in there again with Wilkins and said, "Go and destroy that guy," I don't think it would last 3 rounds.
Yeah, no, I think he said after, didn't he, that you tricked me.
Yeah, you tricked me.
Like, I thought this was going to be easy work, and all of a sudden, here you are, round 7, and I'm breathing, and you're throwing punches, and they're landing. Yarde is 33 now. Obviously, still looks after himself, looks in fantastic condition, always does. All year round, he looks really good. But, you know, I constantly have debates and arguments with people about Anthony Yarde. I stick up for it, and I say, look, Yarde is very, very good. And they say, well, 1 second, his best fights have been losses against Beterbiev and Kovalev. And I like, Lyndon Arthur was good. We almost need to, I need to know where he is. For my own sanity, I need to know how good Yarde is. Like, what's the ceiling here? Because obviously when he's gone to the mountaintop, unfortunately, he's fallen short. No shame in losing to Kovalev. Certainly no shame in losing to Beterbiev. But I almost need to know where he is. And I don't know. Would you say he's world level, Gareth? Or
I think he is world level.
To give him
he's got world level power.
100%. Oh yeah,
but he may not have. We didn't show world level boxing skills on Saturday night, and I'm not being critical there. He didn't set traps and create the openings. It was like a sparring session in lots of ways on Saturday night. Your leading question is this: it's the fight with Buatsi that's going to tell us, you know. And I think that fight is planned, as Ben Shalom revealed to us last week. That was going to be at Crystal Palace that night, but obviously because of boxing politics, it wasn't able to come to fruition in the end. But I think Joshua Buatsi probably goes in as a sizable favourite against Anthony Yarde, but it gives him the opportunity to prove something. I mean, Anthony told us last week that he feels that Joshua Buatsi has made his name based on Yarde, but I'm not sure about that. I think Buatsi's made his own name in a quiet way.
Yeah, I mean, they've both been heavily linked for the last 5 years. So, I mean, that statement from Yarde could apply to Yarde as well.
What did you make of the performance? Because you haven't said.
Didn't like it. Didn't like it. Yeah, it's not good enough. And Yarde knows that, and Tunde would know that as well. Like, the thing about Yarde, it's a bit like the Ben Whitakers of the world and the Eubanks of the world. And because... And Yarde doesn't necessarily talk as much as those two, but you're always excited to see him. Like, go on, Yarde, show us something. And he didn't, unfortunately. And it's that simple. He didn't show enough. And
there wasn't that sustained vicious attack that he can do, like to body and head. It just wasn't there on Saturday night, was it? It was very odd. Yeah,
we didn't get the barrage of combinations that we're used to seeing as well. And then look, I mean, I know some will say he's been out the ring for a long time. I don't know if February's that long. It's not like he's been out the ring for 2 years. So hopefully his next one's a big one. And if it's not Buatsi, I mean, there are some other great names. This is what I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be a situation where if it's not Buatsi, then it's someone like a Wilkins that we don't know. Because you just don't get respect for beating those kind of tough journeymen, if you like. And you just don't. So maybe a Willie Hutchinson then, which is probably impossible considering who he's with. But I don't know. There has to be someone else out there, if not Boatsy. There needs to be a fullback plan here for Yarde. Because since the Beterbiev fight, it's Jorge Silva, it's Mikulic, and now it's Wilkins. And that's just not a good enough run when you put in a really good... Wasn't it Fight of the Year, the Beterbiev
Yeah, it was
fight?
one of the Fights of the Year. I don't know if it was named Fight of the Year, but it's certainly... I think you might be right.
I think over here it was. I think over here it was Fight of the Year. So you can't go from Fight of the Year to those three opponents. You're clearly above this level. And I want to see him stay in
Callum Smith.
that level. Yeah. Ooh. What is going on?
Well, it's very quiet. Well, he hasn't fought since last...
He hasn't fought.
Since February.
Since
January, sorry. I was out there at that one with Beterbiev. Yeah.
Yeah, he hasn't fought since then. So we'll see. Very, very quickly. Edmondson, Aziz, very quickly. I thought Aziz won that fight, and I don't know how Edmondson got the nod, if I'm honest with you.
No, I agree. I thought Dan won it by 2 rounds. I was obviously watching the fight very closely. It was one of those fights where you felt like you were watching it for a week. Because the styles didn't gel, and you know, every motion felt like a day and a half, didn't it? You know, it was a very, very long. You know how some fights go really quickly. This went really slowly. As I said at the time on the broadcast, I remember the late great Burt Randolph Sugar. I was sitting with him at a Vladimir Klitschko fight in the second row, and he elbowed me and he said, "Hey, listen, wake me up when the fight breaks out." Yeah. And it was Dan Aziz trying to do his thing. Louis Edmondson, like, he's so awkward. He switches, he does weird things, and it was very hard to score. But I thought Dan did more work and landed more. But Edmondson was good at the end, and you have to congratulate Edmondson. And we all thought it was going to be a hard fight for Dan Aziz. But where does Dan Aziz go from here? 2 losses and a draw in his last 2.
Boy,
his last 3,
no
sorry.
Idea. Ben Whittaker, maybe Ben Whittaker. Ben's looking for a name. Dan Aziz was looking for a sort of a redemption fight, and considering how Ben looked last time out, maybe that's a fight they can make. They're both a boxer. All right, you're listening to Fight Extra on talkSPORT 2. Still to come, we're going to talk Francis Ngannou's return to the octagon, and if there is any chance of a super fight between him and the great John Jones. We'll also look ahead to Catchall versus Prograde this weekend from Manchester. But up next, we're going to reflect on the recent Riyadh season card and discuss what could be lined up next in the Saudi capital. Welcome back. You're listening to Fight Extra on talkSPORT 2. Ade Oladipo, the great Gareth Davies. Gareth, this is our first time seeing each other since the Riyadh season card. Reflections on the card. You can go first. Like, its entirety, not just the main event, entirety, the card. What would you say?
It was an amazing event to be at. Thoroughly enjoyable. Paced really well. Loads of drama. I mean, from the bottom to the top. Ben Whittaker and Liam Cameron was a very odd finish and a very odd fight. Liam Cameron was matching Ben Whittaker. Ben Whittaker got involved in a firefight, which was a mistake. He should have been Ben Whittaker. Very weird ending. I felt that... I'm not going to say Ben Whittaker was looking for a way out. People have said that, but he wasn't happy in there. There's no question about it. He's obviously sprained his ankle. I'd like to have seen him try to get to his feet, which is why there was so much consternation. There has to be a rematch, in my view, and it will be a good fight this time. And Whittaker will be Whittaker, and Cameron will be Cameron. Great move by Frank Warren to sign Liam Cameron as well. That becomes a big fight next year, but it looks like it won't happen this year. Devastated for Fraser Clarke. Fabio Wardley was brilliant. Glad to have seen Fraser Clarke at the airport and know he was on his way home on the Sunday with his wife, with brilliant surgery from Turki Al Sheikh and his team. The amazing thing was that Turki Al Sheikh, I think, had said, "I'll go to the hospital with you." I'd heard, by the way, which is, just look at what that means. Chris Eubank did the job. Looked good, but slight signs of aging. Glad Conor Benn got in there and stoked the fire. I won't go into the Conor Benn history right now. The women's fight was brilliant. Sky Nicholson was extraordinarily majestic. I saw that from 3 seats away. And is it the main event after that? or have I missed
It
something?
is the main event. No, that's the main event. Obviously, there's a couple of prelim cards fights, but we
Yeah,
won't get into
but
those.
so there was loads of drama, loads of stuff.
Jaya
Oh,
Pattaya. Jaya
Jaya
Pattaya.
Pattaya walked Jack Massey down and showed how brilliant he is as a
That was the
cruiserweight.
performance of the night for me.
He's so brilliant, and it was great to be around them all week. And then Beterbiev and Bivol, Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol. I had Beterbiev winning by 2 rounds in the end. It was initially 8-4. I had it for him, like that one judge. But I looked back at a couple of rounds which were real swing rounds, and they could have easily gone to Bivol. I got 15-13 in the end, but it was what people don't understand when we say it was what you like, and that is how you judge aggression and tenacity and pushing the pace. If you liked Bivol's boxing, you could have gone for Bivol. But here's the thing. I went back and studied the cards. This is what's interesting about it. After all the consternation and calls of robbery, those 3 judges, Ade, and this is unusual, agreed on 10 of the 12 rounds. All 3 judges. And they just disagreed on 2 rounds. And that's where we get the 114, 114, 115, 13, 116, 12. It was a very, very, very close fight. And it could have gone either way.
Yeah.
But it was brilliant as well. And it was incomplete. And we need maybe another 24 rounds.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on a couple of things you said there. First of all, I thought the card was fantastic. Every fight, maybe apart from Sky Raven, had its own drama. Sky made sure there was no drama because Sky was just a ballerina.
Amazing.
A ballerina with fist. Yeah,
ballerina is a great word for it because she did look like that. Her shell was, it was extraordinary, the performance.
Yeah, she was very, very...
Does that Sky beat Amanda Serrano?
Possibly. Amanda Serrano at this stage of her career. Difficult for me to say that because I think Amanda's incredible, lovely human being, can punch as well. That's the thing. Sky's not been tagged clean on the chin by someone that can punch. Amanda will tag her, then let's see how she reacts. Is she a ballerina or does she get on her bike? We'll soon find out. But I think that's the one. Or Alicia Baumgardner. We need to see 1 or 2 of these fights. So there are some good fights for her to have, and Sky's got the frame where she can kind of move up and down the weight. So move up the weight, sorry. I thought Jai stole the show. Well, not stole the show, but I thought Jai's performance against Jack Massey was just wow. A lot of people question Jai because of those last couple of rounds against Bradis, and he just got silenced everyone and proved that I think he is the best cruiserweight in the world. Very scary, the Fabio Wardley knockout of Fraser Clark. Very scary, just because of that, the way in which his jaw kind of sloped and the indentation.
It looked like a stroke, first of all, didn't it? Like someone was having a stroke.
That's exactly what it looked like. Yeah. I never thought of that. Yeah. That's exactly what it looked like. And I went in the ring after, and I wasn't like Mannix was doing all the ring interviews, but I think the agreement was that I do the co-main and main. But so I didn't know I was getting in, and then they kind of said, "Ade, get in the ring." I was like, "Okay, I'll get in the ring." So I then made a little beeline for Fraser, and I went and looked at him, and I thought, I don't know why, that just kind of reaffirmed the dangers of the sport for me when I saw big Fraser Clark, all 6'7" of him, like that, slumped. And I thought, my God, Fabio's got some power. And I guess we'll talk about what Fabio can do next. I want to quickly jump to the main event because of time. I had it 7-5 Bivol. But I have no complaints if anyone says 115, 113, or even 116, 112 Beterbiev, because those rounds were uber close. That there was a couple of those rounds, which the swing rounds you're referring to, where I thought Bivol did amazing for 2 minutes. And then all of a sudden his head gets popped back, and then he's on the defense for a minute, and Beterbiev's onto him like a swarm of bees. And I'm like, if you're a judge, what do you do there? Do you go for the guy that won the first 2 minutes who didn't really inflict much damage? Or do you go for the guy that caused the damage and is making the other guy run back, if you like? And those are the swing rounds, which are very, very tough. But I'm a Bivol fan. I have a Bivol top behind me. I'm going to give those to Bivol. But if you gave those to Beterbiev, no problem whatsoever.
I just thought, some people saw Bivol's footwork as moving him out of range. I saw Beterbiev walking him down. I thought, like as you say, the more damage was done by Beterbiev, and I even felt by the end of the fight, my sense was that Beterbiev was bullying him.
No, he was.
But maybe he wasn't. But
no, he was.
And so
he was a monster.
He was. But Beterbiev, very few of us picked Beterbiev on points, you know, because we were expecting him to either get to Bivol late or Bivol to outbox him. For the first 4 rounds, it was all Bivol for me. And then Beterbiev came into the fight, and he had a long sequence where I thought he was doing his thing. And again, I was in the arena, like you, we saw each other just before, and I said, make it sing, baby, be you. Do you remember we were about to start work?
Yeah.
And I went to a gantry on the opposite side or alongside from you, and I was ending up watching it on a giant screen. So effectively, I was watching it on a large TV screen. And my impression is more people at ringside had it for Bivol, actual ringside. They need to fight again. For me, they both left a lasting impression in the ring. And I know it was controversial because a draw probably would have been like the best outcome for everyone in the world, and then we wouldn't have had the debate for the next 2 weeks because people were very vehement. First of all, I mean, I even saw your comments that the judge needs to explain his scoring, and maybe they do need to explain it. But if he explained it, the 2 other judges would have agreed on the same 10 rounds of the 12.
Yeah, no.
So, but it was that kind of night. It was drama. It was fantastic. We were all heightened. It was very special. But you get the feeling as you walked away, we need to see this again.
Yeah, the only issue, I guess, with seeing it again is Ramadan, obviously. Beterbiev being a Muslim. So if it does have to happen again, it has to happen early next year, or you have to wait until October again. And that's I guess, the issue. I hope there's no interim fights in between, but you do have people waiting. Boatsi's waiting for his shot. The winner of Benavidez Morale is going to be waiting for their shot. There's going to be other mandatories thrown their way. I don't necessarily care about the belts. I don't care if it's undisputed. I just want to see it again. I want to see it again, and I think they deserve to do it.
It's the championship of each other now. That's what matters, not the belts. It's the champion. It's all. I think they may well have 3. Bivol will probably make the adjustments in the second fight and be more active at the beginning and the end of the rounds, and it'll be more because that's what Canelo did in the second Golovkin fight. I remember speaking to the late great Don Chargin, who discovered Canelo, who promoted people like George Foreman when he came back from 10 years in the wilderness with Bill Kaplan, George Foreman's old PR guy, who was with him from the age of 18, who I spoke to last night, by the way. I was having an hour's chat with Foreman's old PR guy last night, catching up with him in Los Angeles. And that's what Canelo did in that second fight with Golovkin, Ade. Made sure he was active in the first 30 seconds and the last 30 seconds of the fight. And it stays with the judges. And I think Bivol will do that more. I think he'll win narrowly on points in the second one. And I think we'll have a third fight. It may stretch out over the next 2 years. And I have been reading that we might have to wait a year for it. But it's too long in my view.
Yeah, look, hopefully we get it done. I will say this about Beterbiev, who I think now is maybe, I don't know, top 4 pound for pound with that win. I think he's one of the scariest fighters I've ever seen in my life. Like the most intimidating. In the ring, he's massive. Like it looked like there were 2 weight classes apart. Beterbiev looked like a cruiserweight coming down, and Bivol looked like a 168 guy coming up. Like he's a monster. To think that guy had knee surgery in, what was it, May?
Yeah.
Had knee surgery in May, and he's performing like that, and he's gas tank. He's a 15-round fighter.
Correct.
And he's 39. I just find him frightening.
I thought about that as well. Who would win over 15 rounds? Who would win over 20 rounds? That was. It's not in my thinking of judging it. But
good luck to any light heavyweight in the last 20 years fighting that man over 15 rounds. Like you're gonna have to dent him, and like you're gonna have to Kovalev dent him. Like someone's gonna need to put a real. You're not gonna outbox him because he's gonna get to you at some stage, as he did with Bivol. Bivol's movement, by the way, was incredible. But even Bivol's like, I can't keep doing this. Like, I've got to stand and fight. And when he stood and fight, that's when he got tagged a couple of times.
I know we've got to move on, but my feeling was as well, Bivol landed like several 3-punch combinations that were extraordinary, and it kind of stopped Beterbiev for a moment. But it rocked him back slightly onto one back leg, supporting himself. But I saw Bivol hurt a few times during the fight. Not desperately hurt, but I on my way out, I spoke to this guy, you know, where we all go out, we get our cars and buses and all those things out of the arena where all the fighters arrive. I spoke to a guy called Pavel, or Pablo, but he's a Russian, and he worked in Gvozdik's corner in the fight against Beterbiev. And he said to me, because we were having a chat about it, he said, "How did you have it?" He had it for Bivol. And he said, you know, when I was in the corner with Gvozdik, when he fought Beterbiev, the last couple of rounds, they said, "How are you feeling?" He said, "It feels like I'm being hit with a man holding 2 bricks, you know? That's what Beterbiev's punches feel like, apparently." And it's extraordinary. Could we see Beterbiev in with Jaya Pataya or not? Or is there too big a difference in size?
I don't think there is. I asked Beterbiev, would you go up to cruiserweight? He said yes. He wants to go up to cruiserweight. He likes the challenge. Wow. And basically it's just him not cutting weight, because the weight cut for him is vicious. I spoke to his team and it's a difficult weight cut because he is so big. And Jai is not the biggest cruiserweight. You've been around big cruiserweights. Jai is not the biggest. Jai is what, 6 foot, 6'1". Same height as Beterbiev, really. Just obviously Jai is a bit thicker. I would love to see that as a super fight. Oh, absolutely. I would love to see that. With no disrespect to Zerda and Chris Billum-Smith, I'd love to see Beterbiev Jai more than Chris Billum-Smith Jai.
Yeah, I would, but I think I would as well. But I think Jai's headed for probably one fight at Bridger and then up to heavyweight. You know, David Haye.
Yeah, that's why we've got one gap to happen it now. One gap. Like if it wasn't controversial a couple of weeks ago, I think Turkey would 100% say Jai versus Beterbiev now. But because it was a bit of a controversial sort of outcome, I think we're going to get Bivol Beterbiev again. Yeah, no, that's my feeling. All right, you're listening to Find It Extra on talkSPORT 2. Next up, we're going to get stuck into Jack Catterall versus Regis Prograis. That's coming up this weekend. Welcome back. You're listening to Find It Extra on talkSPORT 2. Ade Oladipo, the great Gareth Davies. All right, this weekend, we're finally getting Jack Catterall Regis Prograis. Feels like we've been talking about this or building up to it for months. That's because it was supposed to happen in August. Jack Catterall injured. He's now fully fit, so we go again now. This is an interesting one because earlier in the show, we were talking about Azim, and you mentioned sort of names in the 140-pound division. You kind of reeled off about 8 or 9 names. And the 140 division all of a sudden has become sort of the most stacked division, with sort of guys coming towards the end, i.e., you know, Prograis and Josh Taylor, guys coming up, the Adam Azims of the world, and guys in the middle, Liam Parrow, champion, Catterall, Richardson, Hitchens. This is such an important fight for Catterall because you kind of lose this one, you fall back down the ladder, and this is the wrong time to be falling back down the ladder in the 140-pound division.
Yeah, well, the great thing about, look, if he can beat Regis Prograis, this is a guy that has fought and lost to Devin Haney, who beat Jose Zepeda, who had a war with Josh Taylor, who beat Kirill Relic, and goes all the way back to beating the likes of Julius Indongo, who was a difficult guy at the time in the division, Terry Flanagan, all these names. You look at Jack's record. He's beaten the undisputed guy in many people's eyes in Josh Taylor. He's never won the world title. Yeah, he's beaten Josh Taylor a second time. There were no titles on the line. If he beats Regis Prograis, he's beaten another world champion, who obviously is not a world champion right now. In many ways, he's undefeated and he's beaten an undisputed. So he's a very difficult guy to beat, in my view. And I wonder whether if he wins this, maybe he gets a Devin Haney fight or he gets a Liam Parrow fight. I think Eddie Hearn promotes Liam Parrow at the moment, so that's a possibility for Jack Catterall. So I wonder whether they're looking for that route at the moment. But like you say, very, very important fight for him and maybe coming at a good time.
Yeah, very, very important fight for Regis Prograis as well. Obviously, look, coming off the Devin Haney defeat. And that was an embarrassing defeat for Regis. Devin Haney coming up in weight. Regis was the champion, and Regis lost every single round in that fight. Regis is now 35, and look, you reeled off some of the names that he's fought there, and he's had an amazing career. I just wonder what's left in him. Could it be a case of, the world's against him and we get to see the last kind of hurrah of Regis progress here? Could it be dangerous because of that? But Jack Catterall needs to make a statement here. He needs to get in the mix for a world title fight. I think he should have got the Liam Parrow fight. Like, when this fight was initially postponed, they were looking for an opponent for Liam Parrow. All of a sudden, they've given it to Richardson Hitchens, and the fight's going to be in Puerto Rico. But I thought Jack could have jumped over Richardson Hitchens and got the fight. That's what I thought. I thought it would have made perfect sense, but this is boxing.
Well, Eddie Hearn's moving the pieces around the board, isn't he? So Catterall's going to be in the mix. He's not a big talker, Jack. He doesn't put himself out there very much, but what he is he sticks to his guns. He's a very awkward fighter. Remember, this is two southpaws fighting each other on Saturday night, and that's interesting as well. And that may cause a few more problems for Jack, because Regis does get inside and he does bob and weave very well, and he fights well on the inside. The trouble is, the optics of his last performance against Devin Haney don't augur well for him. I think it's a good time for Jack. I think Jack doesn't. He's just a difficult guy to fight. He's got a great shell. He's got great timing. He's got the ability to win rounds, and he showed in that fight with Josh Taylor how deep he can dig when the going gets tough. Because it was a really good fight, and Josh Taylor gave his all in that contest, even though I think I had him losing 16-12 on the night, something like that. That was a 16-12, 15-13 contest. But Jack Catterall's never really got the credit he deserves, and that's why I was saying at the beginning, this is a guy that's beaten and undisputed, and for me, and in many fans' eyes, he's still an undefeated fighter. And that's some record. Progress, it's really good match. It's potentially really good matchmaking here by Eddie Hearn.
Yeah, no, good matchmaking. And look, the 140-pound division, I think, is wide open. I think Teofimo Lopez, apologies, is the number one in the division. But then the names after that, I think potentially they're all in good fights. Sabril Matias is going to come back, who everyone thought was going to be the boogeyman. Liam Parrow, we knew, fight Richardson Hitchens. We wait to see the outcome of this boiling dispute between Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. They look like they're going to get on again when Ryan comes off.
Without question.
Ban.
Without question.
Yeah.
Huge fight.
So it's an interesting division. I want to quickly highlight one fight that is on the card that not many people are talking about. I think it's going to be fight of the night easily, and that's Reece Bellotti versus Michael Gomez Jr. You would have covered Michael Gomez, his dad, who had many fights in Manchester, one of those guys and characters that everyone liked to tune into. This is for the British and Commonwealth super featherweight titles. And if you can, tune in for that one, because I think that one's going to be explosive. Reece Bellotti's had somewhat of an Indian summer, moving up to super feather, and Michael Gomez, I believe, was the English champion. Yeah. So it's a good fight, this.
Very much so. And as you say, Michael Gomez, the Mexican-Irish, used to come out with his big sombrero on, born in the back of a car in Navan Island, he was, by the way, famously. A real tearaway. Like you say, it's unbelievable to think he's probably around 50 now and his son's boxing. And he's a great character, Michael Gomez Jr. He's a very handsome young man, obviously Mancunian. And Reece Bellotti, like you say, the guy who works as an electrician on movies, by the way. He's worked on Harry Potter and all these amazing storylines, actually, some of our guys. And it's a great matchup. They'll both throw their hands. We're going to get an all-action war, basically. So, like you say, it's very good and very wise of you to point that out. It's a must-not-miss contest.
It certainly is. All right, you're listening to Find Out Extra on talkSPORT 2. Next up, we are going to talk about the emphatic return of the Predator, Francis Ngannou. Welcome back to Find Out Extra on talkSPORT 2. Ade Oladipo, Gareth Davies. All right, let's talk about the Predator. One of the good guys in combat sport, Francis Ngannou, who returned to the octagon after nearly 2 years out. Let's not forget, people, this guy's last couple of fights have been in boxing against Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. And he turned against a monster, all 6'8" of him, in Renan Ferreira. And Ngannou destroyed him in the very first round.
Yeah, it was
Destroyed him in the very first round.
It was very interesting, Eddie, because I thought there'd be a lot of cage rust, if we can call it that, for Big Francis, the Predator. But to be honest, he looked more rounded than we've ever seen him in this fight. And Renan Ferreira is known for being fantastic on the ground, very versatile, even though he's the stature of a Tyson Fury, for being really rounded in the cage. And I thought Francis took to it like he'd never been away, 3 years away. But I also think, and I think this is important, he's drawn a whole boxing audience that he's developed through those 2 fights with Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua to want to be interested in his life, to want to be interested in his career. And I've spoken to and heard a lot of boxing fans talking about that, and he's in all the aggregators in the boxing news, and people are delighted for him, obviously because of the tragedy that he's gone through this year with the death of his 15-year-old son, an incredible thing he's gone through. And while I was watching it, it did take me back to seeing him at the PFL in Washington in August, I think it was, where I said to him, do you realise, Francis, how you inspire all of us, the way you are and what you've done in your life? And he said, yeah, man, but you know, it just makes me think life sucks. And, you know, I will never forget those words from him. We're telling someone's story and we're sympathizing and empathizing, but the scars are deep inside him. And
yeah, he's living this story.
He's living the story.
We're watching it. Yeah, we're watching it through our own lens. He's living it. He's living these fights, the knockouts, the death of his son, having to come back and have this fight. Right. I mean, I felt in the lead up to it that mentally he wouldn't be there and he wouldn't be ready, and physically, where's he going to be as well after being knocked out by AJ? He's having to live through all this. And I think that's why we saw the emotion after him crying. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of outpouring of just so much that's happened in the last 12 months, and a lot that we won't even know. But yeah, it was emotional watching him cry, because he's an amazing, friendly giant. Like such a nice, soft giant, obviously, who gets into the cage and turns into this wrecking machine. But outside of it, just a nice guy.
Deeply, deeply scarred. And he may never be able to talk about the depths of hurt and things he's gone through that, you know, we know his journey out of Africa. I mean, you know, your ancestors are Nigerian, you know, and you know about Africa. You and I have spoken privately and publicly many times about the African continent and how people's stories there and how they belong in the fight world because of the stories of struggle and survival. And the world's changing. And he's a modern totemic, emblematic example of resilience and physical strength, and the deep spirit in that man is very obvious sometimes. And it was very moving seeing him cry and break down. There were a lot of things going on there, and yeah, it's quite amazing. Quite amazing. I feel emotional talking about it, to be honest.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's an amazing story, and one now with that win that continues, and does it continue to the super fight we all want to see, which is John Jones?
I think it will.
I mean, does Tom Aspinall deserve a crack at the great man? It's not that I don't think Tom deserves it, but I almost want this to be one for the old guard. Like, who is going to, you know, the old guard being John and Francis. I feel like Tom, the young guard. Tom, you'll get your chance when they all disappear and vanish into the wilderness. But I almost feel like I want to see John, who fights Stipe soon, John versus Francis. Make it happen, Turkey. Please.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, in MMA terms, it's almost like not seeing, who would it be? It's almost
Anderson
like not seeing Tyson Fury against Anthony Joshua.
Oh, in MMA terms? No, it's bigger than that. Oh, no, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that.
Do you think?
I think it's bigger than that. Yeah, I think it's bigger than that, because I think this is, you're talking about the greatest MMA fighter of all time.
Agreed.
All time. In John. You know what I mean? And maybe the greatest heavyweight of all time. Maybe. So this is just enormous.
Yeah, I agree. In MMA terms, it is enormous. I think it will happen. Because we've got this relationship between Dana White and Turki Al-Sheikh at the moment as well. So who knows?
It's just a relationship between Dana and Francis. That's the issue. Very quickly, as we wrap, Chris Cyborg was talking about the greats and goats, and she has to be in that conversation. She beat Larissa Pacheco over 5 rounds. Chris now 39, and she's been doing this 20 years. I mean, she's been kicking ass for 20 years. And apart from that Amanda Nunes, like if I could erase that Amanda Nunes fight from my memory, that should be the GOAT of all GOATs. But because I have vivid memories of that first round defeat to Amanda, I think they get Amanda back and run it back one more time.
Well,
I think they get it back.
That'll be great as well. But I still think Cyborg in terms of body of work, the grand slam of all the titles, I feel like she's the women's GOAT. But on Saturday night, Larissa Pacheco, if you could have found a woman who's like a mirror image of Cyborg, that was her. Yeah. It was like watching two fighters in the mirror image of each other fighting. I couldn't believe her resilience in those last 2 rounds to take the title. It was extraordinary. Like you say, at 39, quite incredible.
All these girls are lucky she's not 24 anymore. Because the Cyborg at that age was just a wrecking machine with no, like, now I almost feel like she's been somewhat, she's just been relaxed. Like the world living in America has just almost softened her a little bit. That Cyborg of when she first came from Brazil was just one of the most frightening things I've ever seen in my life in a ring.
And also, I know Cyborg quite well, and I've met her probably 20, 30 times. She is a beautiful person, by the way. She gets vilified on social media and gets bullied and all these kind of things. She is a wonderful person. The work she does in Africa, by the way, with her charity, she is an amazing person, an absolutely amazing person.
She is, and hopefully we get to see her fight a couple more times because she is a champion now as well. All right, you have been listening to Find It Extra on talkSPORT 2. Remember, before I go, very quickly, sorry, and we'll talk about this next Tuesday when we do the podcast again. Illy versus Max. I mean, that's coming up. I mean, which way are you swinging? I love Max so much, but this is the only, you know what the problem is? Max has been considered by many the best striker, best boxer in the UFC. Unfortunately, having watched Illy can box better, I think. And that's my only reservation and problem for Max in this one.
Yeah, I've known Max since he was 19 when he first came into the UFC many, many years ago. He's a brilliant character, brilliant Hawaiian fighter, very proud man. There's a lot of mileage on the clock now, a lot of mileage. And I think, and he's never been stopped, remember, Ilia Topuria for me is obviously coming with age and vim and vigor. I think it might be the first time that Max Holloway gets stopped.
No, hopefully not, but we'll see.
But you can't write him off.
No, of course not. Of course not. Not Max. No, of course not. I think one of the best featherweights, if not the best featherweight of all time. All right, you've been listening to Find It Extra on talkSPORT 2. Remember, if you've missed any of the show, you can listen to it as a podcast. Find it under the Fight Night banner on the talkSPORT app or wherever you get your podcast from. We will be back next week.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.